This diminutive diner, situated at the intersection of Broad Street and Magnolia Avenue, was not particularly visually appealing. The flickering neon sign outside, which read Marcy's Diner, may have deterred passers-by. However, the aroma of freshly brewed coffee and searing bacon welcomed all who entered. Latoya had been employed at the establishment for 7 years, and although the compensation was inadequate, she took pleasure in treating each client as if they were a member of her family. Latoya was renowned for her empathetic demeanor and her remarkable capacity to discern when an individual was experiencing a difficult day. Before sunrise, she frequently arrived to prepare for the breakfast surge, working the morning shifts. Her supervisor, Mr. Harper, maintained a stringent control over the diner, consistently reminding the staff to adhere to the fundamentals and refrain from devoting time to superfluous formalities. He considered time to be a valuable commodity, and he perceived each second that Latoya spent conversing with customers or providing additional tissues as a squandered opportunity. It was Thursday morning, shortly after the morning bustle had subsided. A man entered the room just as Latoya had completed refilling the coffee pots. He was not the typical customer at the diner. He did not wear a blue-collar uniform, and he was not a familiar visage from the neighborhood. His tie was slightly awry, and he was attired in a crisp, albeit wrinkled, suit. Not only did he appear to be out of place, but he also appeared to be disoriented. His eyes darted around the room before settling on a booth in the corner, as he hesitated near the entrance, and Latoya observed him. He moved slowly, as if the weight of the world were resting on his shoulders. She was struck by something about his demeanor. She approached his table and retrieved a menu. "Good morning, sir," she responded with a cordial greeting as she placed the menu in front of him. "Would you like me to serve you a cup of coffee?" The man's expression was strained and fatigued as he raised his head to observe her. He requested water, his voice scarcely rising above a whisper. Latoya nodded and returned a moment later, with a glass of water. "You can take your time," she said gently. "Please inform me if you require any assistance." She observed Mr. Harper's stern expression as she returned to the counter. "Latoya," he said abruptly, his voice subdued but resolute, "we are unable to accommodate loiterers. If he is not placing an order, he must vacate the premises." Her abdomen contracted. She harbored a deep-seated resentment toward Mr. Harper's tendency to evaluate individuals solely on the basis of their physical attributes. She maintained her composure and stated, "He is simply making a decision." Mr. Harper abruptly stated, "You have tables to clean. Paying customers should be prioritized." Latoya withdrew, biting her tongue. She was opposed to confrontation, but something about the man's reserved demeanor made her feel as though she could not simply disregard him. She was familiar with the sensation of being invisible, as if people were able to see straight through her. She was not about to subject him to that. She discovered small methods to extend kindness over the course of the next few minutes. She replenished his water supply without solicitation. She brought him a napkin and said, when she observed him fidgeting with his tie, "It appears that you have had a difficult morning. Please inform me if there is anything I can provide to keep you warm." She thought she saw a glimmer of gratitude in his eyes for a moment, as the man gave her a feeble smile. Ultimately, he requested a modest breakfast consisting of scrambled eggs and toast, which he consumed in silence. Latoya maintained a watchful eye on him, prepared to provide assistance if necessary, but she refrained from interrogating him. Upon completion, he rose and reached into his pocket. However, his hand was devoid of any items. His face was reddened with embarrassment as he muttered, "I appear to have misplaced my wallet." Latoya intervened prior to Mr. Harper's awareness. She responded promptly, "It is satisfactory. I possess this item." The man's gaze widened. "I am unable to permit you to." She shrugged and said, "It's just eggs and toast," in an attempt to convey a casual tone. "Consider it a gesture of kindness." He gazed at her for an extended period, as if he were in quest of the appropriate words. Ultimately, he stated, "I am grateful, sincerely." Latoya smiled and nodded, dismissing the matter as inconsequential. However, she was aware of Mr. Harper's gaze as he exited the diner. He addressed her as Latoya, his demeanor remaining icy. "I am currently in my office." Latoya proceeded to Mr. Harper's confined office, which was situated at the rear of the diner. The walls were adorned with faded photographs, and the bookcases were overflowing with antiquated invoices. The room had a faint aroma of expired coffee and frustration, which served as an appropriate setting for the events that Latoya was aware were imminent. Mr. Harper did not squander his time. He demanded, his voice sharp enough to cut through the hum of the diner outside, "What were you thinking giving that man a free meal? You are aware that we are unable to distribute charity in this location. Latoya maintained her composure by draping her arms across her chest. He appeared to require assistance. She stated in a uniform manner. It was not a significant issue. Mr. Harper's expression turned red as he responded. Not a significant issue. Do you believe that this establishment functions on the basis of good intentions? You are present to perform work, not to serve as a savior. Her voice remained unwavering, despite the fact that her cheeks were flushed with wrath. I fail to comprehend how a breakfast of toast and eggs could result in the diner's financial ruin. Slamming his hand down on the desk, Mr. Harper shouted. That's not the point. You humiliated me in front of a customer, and now you are engaging in a heated argument with me. This is not your personal charity organization. Latoya, if you are unable to adhere to the regulations, it is possible that you are not a suitable candidate for this position. The words lingered in the air like a cloud of smoke, suffocating and inescapable. Latoya's heart was beating as she gazed at him. She reflected on the years she had spent at the diner, during which she had to handle difficult customers, clear up messes without complaint, and spend long hours on her feet. In this instant it all seemed to be without significance. She responded quietly, suppressing the lump in her throat. Fine, she said. I will leave if that is your disposition. Mr. Harper blinking. It was evident that he did not anticipate her calling his ruse. After a brief delay, he announced, You have been terminated. His tone was now more subdued, but it was no less authoritative. Please pack your belongings and depart. You will be able to retrieve your final paycheck at the conclusion of the week. Latoya declined to permit him to observe the tears that were forming in her eyes, and she simply affirmed. She turned and exited the office with her head held high. The other employees observed her in a state of awe as she retrieved her coat and luggage. She refrained from bidding farewell. It was unnecessary. The reality of the situation began to dawn on her as she emerged into the frigid morning air. She had been terminated from her position due to a straightforward act of compassion. She experienced a combination of sorrow and anger. However, a calm sense of resolve was present beneath it all. She had acted in accordance with her convictions, and no one could revoke that. I walked home in silence for an extended period of time. A few blocks away, Latoya resided in a modest apartment that was situated above a laundromat. The room was adequate for her and her tabby cat, Smokey, despite its modest size and cleanliness. Her legs felt heavier with each step as she ascended the stairs to her front door. Smokey greeted her with a gentle purr, weaving between her legs as she removed her shoes. Latoya's head was resting on her palms as she sank onto the couch. She relived the morning in her consciousness, questioning her actions at each stage. Had she made the appropriate decision? Is it possible that she could have approached the situation differently? She was aware that she could not have disregarded the man's apparent need for assistance, despite the doubts that gnawed at her. She lay in bed that night, gazing upwards. Bills accumulated in her mind, each requiring an answer that she lacked. She was without a fallback plan, and rent was due in 2 weeks. However, she couldn't shake the feeling that this was not the conclusion of her narrative. It is impossible. The subsequent day, she rose early with the intention of determining her subsequent actions. However, she was interrupted by a tap at the door as she was preparing to pour herself a cup of coffee. Her heart skipped a beat as she froze. She was not anticipating the presence of anyone. She proceeded to the door and cautiously opened it after placing her mug down. Her breath was stopped in her throat as she observed the individual standing there. He was the individual from the cafeteria. He did not appear to be disoriented or disheveled until this moment. He was tall, his suit was crisp, and his expression was both calm and solemn. A tiny envelope was in his possession. "Good morning," he said, his voice remaining steady and welcoming. "I am responsible for providing you with an explanation." Latoya's initial reaction was to shut the door. She was not enraged at the man, far from it, but the shock of seeing him again so quickly caused her to hesitate. However, there was a quiet sincerity in his eyes that caused her to hesitate. "May I enter?" he inquired, holding the envelope aloft as if it were a peace offering. Latoya briefly examined the envelope before turning to face him. Ultimately she resigned. "Certainly," she replied with apprehension. "However, I trust that you were not present to offer an apology for the events that transpired. It was not your fault." The man entered her modest apartment, observing the sparse yet orderly living quarters. Smokey, the inquisitive cat that she is, approached the visitor to examine him. The man made a modest crouch and extended his hand. With a slight smile,
He addressed the individual as a friendly little fellow. Latoya observed him with meticulous attention as she folded her arms. "I apologize for my impoliteness. However, what is your purpose in being present?" The man's smile diminished as he stood up. "Initially, I would like to provide a formal introduction. My name is Jonathan Reeves, and before I proceed, I must inform you that your actions yesterday were of greater significance to me than you can possibly comprehend." Latoya became uncertain about how to respond, causing her to grimace. "I have just brought you some toast and eggs," she stated, her demeanor being reserved. "It was not noteworthy," Jonathan responded. "That is where you are mistaken. When I felt like nothing, you treated me with the dignity of a human being. Are you aware of the rarity of such treatment?" Latoya continued to shake her head, uncertain about the significance of this conversation. "What is the subject of your conversation?" Jonathan breathed deeply and gazed at her. "Yesterday, I was not merely a random individual who entered a diner. Rather, I was conducting an experiment." Latoya reiterated, her voice tinged with incredulity. "An experiment? What type of experiment is this?" Jonathan clarified. "I am a businessman. I am the owner of numerous companies throughout the country. However, I have been in search of a new challenge. Many individuals have expressed their concern about my lack of connection with the challenges of daily life. Consequently, I resolved to investigate this matter for myself. I visited establishments such as your diner, leaving my wallet at home, and dressed casually, in order to observe how individuals interact with individuals whom they perceive as lacking in value." Latoya's pupils grew broad. "So you are implying that you were deceiving?" Jonathan shook his head. "I desired to locate an individual who was sincere, an individual who would provide assistance without anticipating any form of compensation." "Latoya, you were that individual." She was torn between feelings of gratitude and indignation as her stomach roiled. "So what, was this merely a game to you?" "Not at all," Jonathan replied abruptly. "The intention was never to deceive anyone. It was about identifying individuals who continue to uphold the principle of compassion, even in the absence of any tangible compensation. Additionally, you—" He paused before reaching into the envelope. "You restored my faith." Latoya hesitated, before accepting the envelope that he presented to her. The contents contained a check that was so substantial that her breath stopped in her throat. Her hands trembled as she gazed at him. She murmured, "This is impossible."
"It is," Jonathan replied gently. "It is not merely a token of gratitude. It is an investment in each of you. I am of the opinion that you possess a unique quality, and I am eager to assist you in utilizing it." Latoya's mind was ablaze as she gazed at the check, her heart racing. A portion of her yearned to reject it outright. She was not the type to accept favors. However, another part of her, the same part that had spent the previous night fretting about rent and bills, knew that this was a lifeline she could not disregard. She ultimately acknowledged, "I am at a loss for words." Jonathan responded, "Yes, I would be delighted to assist you in the construction of a more improved version of yourself. You are entitled to it." Latoya took a seat on the couch, her palms clasping the check as if it were about to vanish. She was unable to stop gazing at the number. It was more money than she had ever imagined holding in her life. Smokey leapt up beside her, blissfully unaware of the tension in the room, and caressed her arm. It was a meager respite amid the torrent of emotions that consumed her. Jonathan sat across from her, his demeanor composed yet sincere. "I am aware that this is a significant amount of information to process," he said tenderly. "I anticipate that you will not be able to make any decisions at this time. However, I would like to inform you of the rationale behind my actions." Latoya's gaze was directed toward him, still experiencing difficulty in comprehending all of the information. "What is my motivation?" she inquired. Her voice was scarcely audible. "There are countless individuals who require assistance in a more pressing manner than I do." Jonathan leaned forward. He is positioned with his elbows lying on his knees. "Because you did not perceive me as a problem that required resolution. You did not regard me as inferior. You merely rendered assistance. There were no inquiries. There will be no criticism, only compassion." "No, Latoya. That is rare, and it is a quality that the world requires more of." His words struck her like a surge. She washed away the uncertainties that had been accumulating in her mind. She reflected on her tenure at the diner, the numerous occasions on which she had remained late to assist a colleague, or placed a few dollars in the tip receptacle of a busboy who was struggling. She had never perceived any of it as significant. It was simply her nature. However, as I sit across from Jonathan, she came to the realization that her modest acts of compassion had consequences that she was unable to anticipate. "What action do you wish me to take?" Finally, she inquired. Her voice is now more steady. Jonathan smiled, relieved that she was willing to consider his perspective. "That is entirely up to you," he replied. "This is not a loan or a contract, it is a gift. However, I would be delighted to assist you in determining how to operate it, provided that you are amenable, in a manner that is significant." Latoya was taken aback by his sincerity, causing her to pause. "Do you truly believe that?" "I do," he replied with conviction. "However, I have one recommendation, something to consider. Have you ever entertained the notion of establishing your own business?" The sound of her laughter was both brief and lifeless. "Who am I? A business? I am at a loss as to where to begin." Jonathan responded. "That is where I come in. I possess experience, connections and resources. If you are prepared to make the leap, I will provide you with comprehensive guidance throughout the entire process." Latoya's intellect was ablaze with potentialities. She contemplated the activities that she had always aspired to pursue, however, had dismissed it as unattainable. A community center, a catering enterprise, perhaps even a program to assist others in regaining their footing. The concepts appeared to be distant, almost inaccessible. However, for the first time, they did not appear to be wholly implausible. Nevertheless, a portion of her hesitated. "I am hesitant to feel as though I am obligated to you," she stated. Jonathan reassured her. "You will not. The sole request I have is that you remain true to your identity. Utilize this gift to assist others, in the same manner that you assisted me. That concludes the matter." Latoya maintained an extended period of seclusion. She traced the edge of the check with her fingertips. He contemplated the restaurant, regarding Mr. Harper's contempt, and the manner in which he disregarded her compassion as a sign of weakness. She contemplated the individual who was seated across from her, a stranger who had observed something in her that she found it difficult to recognize in herself. She also contemplated her future, the one she had always pictured, but had never ventured to pursue. Eventually, she turned her gaze to Jonathan, a glimmer of resolve in her irises. "All right," she replied. "Let's proceed with this." The days that followed were like a frenzy. Jonathan maintained his commitment to his word, conducting consistent meetings with Latoya, to establish her aspirations and transform them into a tangible strategy. Following numerous discussions and ideation sessions, and an abundance of motivation, she determined her course of action, an establishment that would function as both a business and a community cafe, and a secure environment for individuals who require assistance. The cafe would provide dishes that are reasonably priced, and conduct workshops for employment seekers. There are even community events and financial literacy classes. Latoya aspired for it to serve as more than merely a dining establishment. She desired it to serve as a symbol of optimism for any individual who entered the building. With Jonathan's financial support and his network of connections, suddenly everything began to align. They acquired a location in a bustling neighborhood of the city. Although not extravagant, it is sufficiently spacious to accommodate her vision. Contractors were summoned to conduct renovations, and Latoya dedicated every spare moment to the preparation of menus, recruiting personnel, and disseminating information. Upon the grand opening's arrival, Latoya was situated in the heart of the lively cafe. The turnout was overwhelming. The location was populated by individuals from all spheres of life, old acquaintances, neighbors, and even acquaintances who had heard about her narrative. The atmosphere was electrified with anticipation, and the aroma of freshly brewed coffee and pastries. Jonathan maintained a distance from the group, a subdued grin on his visage, as he observed Latoya operate the space. She conducted herself with assurance, greeting each guest with the tenderness and benevolence that had consistently served as her defining characteristic. He was aware that she no longer required his assistance. She was precisely where she was intended to be. At the conclusion of the evening, Latoya paused to address the audience. While situated in close proximity to the register, her voice was composed yet resonant with sentiment. She revealed her journey. She commenced, "1 year ago I was merely a waitress at a diner." Her gaze traversed the room. "I believed that was the extent of my potential. However, reality occasionally presents unexpected surprises. Sometimes a small gesture of kindness may result in a greater outcome than you could have ever envisioned. Jonathan was the object of her attention as she paused. I discovered that benevolence is not a sign of weakness. It is a virtue, and it has the capacity to transform lives. Not exclusively for the recipient, but for the individual who is providing it. The room erupted in acclaim. Latoya experienced an overwhelming sense of gratitude, despite her numerous self-doubts. However, as I stand in her cafe, surrounded by affection and support, she was aware that she had made the correct decision. Towards the conclusion of the evening, Jonathan approached her. "Latoya, you have accomplished something truly remarkable here." His voice was low and full of pride as he spoke. She replied with sincerity, "I am unable to do it without your assistance." He shook his head. "You possessed it from the beginning. I simply provided you with a gentle shove." Latoya's heart was overflowing with joy as she beamed. "I am grateful for your confidence in me, when I lacked confidence in myself." Jonathan acknowledged by tilting his head. She then took a quick look around the lively cafe. "You will be of great assistance to numerous individuals in this area. I trust that you are aware of this." "I do," Latoya replied, her voice gentle yet unwavering. "And I am prepared." The cafe established itself as a fundamental component of the community, living up to Latoya's vision and beyond. It was not merely a dining establishment. It served as a location for second opportunities, for the purposes of development and connection. The cuisine was not the sole reason for the attendance. However, for the notion of inclusion, they discovered it within its confines. In the case of Latoya, it served as evidence that adhering to her principles, benevolence, compassion, and resilience, was the most valuable asset she could offer, both to herself and to others.